two, 1, 2, 3.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pete Myers. I'm the director of the Tompkins County Workers Center and one of the founders back of the organization, which at that time was called the Tompkins County Living Wage Coalition. I am excited, everybody in the Workers Center is excited, many people in the community are excited about this statewide coalition growing called Raise the Wage, which is about raising the minimum wage in the state of New York in very serious ways. I'd like to introduce incredible Ithaca City Council member and member of Ithaca DSA, George Afendini.
We are all here today because, as usual, our government is dragging its feet on delivering necessary progress. Current minimum wage throughout New York State is $13.20 an hour. Last time it was raised was in 2008, 14 years ago. Let me put that in context for you all. 2008 was the year that President Barack Obama was elected. Facebook was just becoming popular, and I was in elementary school learning my multiplication tables. All this to say, it's been a long time since the minimum wage was last raised. Alternatively, everything else has gotten more expensive. The cost of living has skyrocketed, along with rent and the price of food. You don't need a degree from an Ivy League university to know that when wages don't rise, but costs do, everyday people suffer. I count myself lucky as getting a paycheck from the city of Ithaca, but as of right now, 90% of my monthly paycheck goes to my college town rent. This is the sad reality that many of our neighbors making a minimum wage face, and then some. A surprise medical bill, at the very best, means that it's ramen noodles for the next few weeks. But at the worst, it means wondering how you'll make it through the year. The fact of the matter is that our state government is living in a different reality from the rest of us. $15 an hour is not enough for the average New Yorker to live, let alone thrive. For those who would say that the minimum wage shouldn't raise because people shouldn't be content with a minimum wage job, I dare you to try and do some of the work of our workers in retail, in customer service, and the restaurant industry, who have to deal with on a daily basis, and tell me if you think that warrants 13 or 15 an hour. You deal with nasty customers for 5 days in a row, or man the register or kitchen during a rush hour, and then say we shouldn't raise the wages. We absolutely need to push for 15, but we need to push even farther, because for more than a decade now, we have allowed our government to think settling is okay. Let me be clear, settling is not okay. The minimum wage should be not just enough for a worker to get by, it should be the minimum needed for us to thrive, to live a dignified living. Raising the wage will benefit not just the workers, but the entire economy. More people may actually begin to enjoy their lives, go out to eat more, laugh with friends at the movies, put money away for those bigger purchases, which we were promised was the American dream. American culture loves to glorify the grind and hustle and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. We've been setting working class New Yorkers up for failure by not giving them a fair opportunity to work towards an achievable goal of success. It is well past time to correct this wrong, to get with the times and set up our working class neighbors for a life that isn't defined by how many sacrifices you make for your job. I'm calling on New York State to govern in line with our values. Raise the wage. Thank you.
And it's my fond pleasure to introduce fondly Yolanda Josephs.
I want to say, first and foremost, we're here to understand that $15 an hour is not acceptable. It's not even a livable wage. I mean, unless we're living somewhere that where gas is what, a dollar, rent is $200, different things like that. I did some math regarding even for $30,000 a year, and that equals out to what, $15 an hour. Okay, housing and utilities, on a monthly basis can cost you $1,717. What can equal annually to $20,600. Transportation, and I'm not talking about a car with gas and insurance. I'm just talking about regular transportation just to get around. Could cost you, say, average on a monthly basis, $150. That's annual $1,800, right? For your living wages, living expenses, that's like 56% of your income, and that's $12,000 of your income annually. Now, if you want to go out and splurge a little bit, sometimes if you can, say monthly, maybe $600. Food, this is including food too, groceries as well, $7,200. We're not talking about we can't save no money, right? So we're gonna skip that part. Healthcare. On the average, say monthly, maybe you pay $200 between your medications and different things like that. Annually, that's $2,400. Children education expenses, $500. You have daycare, and that's speaking very minimum. So that's even about like $6,000 like annually. And miscellaneous, you know, you gotta buy toiletries and different things like that, and so forth and so on. Say $525 a month. And that's equaling out to like $6,300, right? So we already now in a deficit of $27,500. And monthly, minusing $2,292. Tell me, how is that fair? How? Would the president or the legislators want to live off that an hour? Could you do that? Would you change places with somebody that's a single mother of 3 children to do that? Even married couples that thrive together to try to make ends meet, they still suffer this kind of consequences. So I say to one and I say to all, let's stick together, push where it needs to be pushed to get the minimum wage raised, at least to $20 an hour. That may be acceptable to Thrive.
The employer is Cornell University, and I would like to introduce John Hill.
Minimum wage, that's like interesting because I was screaming about a $15 minimum wage back in 2016 when I saw Bernie Sanders speak in Binghamton. I don't understand why, when in fact, if we had kept up with productivity, i.e. what we actually do, the minimum wage would actually be something, over $21 an hour if we had kept up with productivity, which is us getting the whip cracked on our back. Another thing I can't really get is that corporations have problems getting workers now. I'm sure you all heard of that. Now, here's a crazy thought. Raise your wage package and your benefits package to maybe, I don't know, entice them to come work. I mean, it's crazy to think that someone making $18.75-ish an hour has trouble making a car payment and credit card payments, and you know that's very foreign to me. When I say that out loud, that number, it shocks me, and I wonder what happened. At what point did that go so low as far as how much it actually costs to live? And clearly, it's just not enough anymore. And they'll say it like they're talking about it as if they were living in 2015. And well, guess what? We're not there. We're 7 years ahead, and you guys have pretty much pushed us to the brink as far as our productivity goes, and you hadn't really caught up paid us for it, which is sad. So the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage, and I didn't know this, is actually $7.25. $7.25 an hour is what the federal minimum wage is. Can anybody, I mean, I don't think I would pay a paper boy that. Are they crazy? I'd like to know who supports that. Are they, and it's weird because these very same people will want to cut social services, cut things from our social safety net while they're cutting or freezing our minimum wage at $7.25 an hour. People if people at my wage are having a hard time trying to get back and forth to work because we can't afford to live in Ithaca, so we move farther out. So that means we got to get a car, have car payments, insurance, etc. And then we have the rent we have to deal with out there. And of course, the landlords out there are like, oh, well, you work here, so here you can pay this amount. No, not true. And so really, our workers are stuck between a rock and a hard place, between living close and paying a lot, an absorbent fee in rent, or going out 15, 20 miles, maybe more, and paying other expenditures just to get to work,
I'd like to introduce Stephanie Heslop to you all, one of the founders of the local Starbucks campaign.
Yes, I am a barista at Starbucks and a very proud rank and file member of Workers United. We've been fortunate to have a lot of community support in our ongoing fight for our union and for a good contract. But sadly, not everyone is on our side. Some people believe that because we make slightly over minimum wage, we should be grateful. The fact is, the minimum wage in this state is a poverty wage, and we deserve much better. Low-wage workers should not be grateful for jobs that don't pay us enough to survive. It is our employers who should be grateful for our labor, and they need to pay us. Everyone deserves to live with dignity, and there is no justification for working people in this very wealthy state, in this obscenely wealthy country, to not make enough money to live. As a low-wage worker myself, this is very personal to me. I'm grateful for the Working Families Democrats here today for their moral leadership on this issue. To the other unions here for fighting for all workers. To my own union for believing that service workers should have dignity and voice. And to the Tompkins County Workers Center for fighting the good fight for many years now. Thank you all, and solidarity forever.
It's my pleasure to introduce Ann Foreman of the Tompkins County Legislature.
I wanted to just mention a little bit about myself. I grew up in a working class family, and we felt fortunate to get, at the beginning of the school year, the kids to get a new outfit, or at Christmas you would get a new outfit. And I remember like cycling through, very small amount of clothing, and thinking about, what the other kids thought about me, or having, at that time, it was this little pink 3x5 card that I would bring to lunch and try and hide it in my pocket. And at the very last minute, when I would go to pay, because I got the free lunch, that I would, quick pull that out and put it back. Hopefully nobody saw, as having another reason to make fun of me. But that's how we grew up. That was normal. That was just how we grew up. Food stamps. We literally was that family that got excited when you got that big block of government cheese. And so I know a lot of you can relate to that. And so I thought it was nothing to work 2 or 3 jobs to survive, and barely survive. And even doing that, there was a lot of times. So I know when you talk about, Yolanda talks about what do you do without and how much do things cost. For me, it was like, well, healthcare was one of the first things to go. Quality food was the next thing to go. Fixing your car, taking care of, having clothing, hanging out with your friends, forget it, unless it was free. And so I've lived like that most of my life, and I will never forget that. I bring that to the county legislature, and I also bring stories. Mine is just one story, but hearing, how people working in this community, what they're struggling with. I bring that, and we want to hear your stories. I will keep fighting and figuring out how we can either do this on a statewide level or a county level. I did a little bit of the numbers too, like Yolanda, that even if we went up to, say, $14.21 for the state minimum wage, or when we do go up to that $14.21, right now the local living wage for this area is $16.61, and as we talked about, that doesn't mean you can actually live off of $16.61 an hour. But the difference in that, and those figures is $5,000. So even if you could live off of 1661, $5,000, what are you gonna get rid of? You know, healthcare, healthy food, et cetera. So anyway, I will keep in this fight, and I'm honored to sit at this table. And I wanted to also thank Raise Up for doing this and working across the state to help make this happen, and I will help out as best I can.
It's my pleasure to introduce Leah Webb.
One of the things that, I often think about, in my own experience and coming from a blue-collar family is that the reality of the fact that we actually have minimum wage is because of labor. And it wasn't because folks were sitting around thinking, what can we do to make people's lives easier, right? Right? It took an organized movement of concerned residents, leaders coming together and saying that not only do we need to have fair wages, but we deserve it. And so for me, as someone who's an organizer, a proud labor member myself, and most certainly as a candidate, I've had the opportunity to connect with many people around this important issue. And what I often am struck by is that there's always a pushback to say, well, it's going to cost too much. And I often say back, what's the cost of continuing to do business as usual? We can't talk about having an economy that works for all of us without addressing the gross wage inequalities that exist in our state and in our country. When you think about how communities create sustainable economic development models, one of the things that often comes up is the importance of small business. And I often share that if you have community members who are making living wages, that allows them to reinvest in those local economies, which helps to spur and support small businesses. And the benefits don't just stop there. When you look at the benefits of having a wage that not only allows you to live, but to thrive, what that does for communities is that it creates much better health outcomes, right? You're now able to afford to physically live in spaces, housing that's quality. Your overall quality of life improves significantly from birth. And I think that is something that as leaders and as concerned people, that we have to reframe the narrative around what it means to have a living wage, but more importantly, a wage that allows us to thrive, and what that means and the implications of it, the significant benefits of that. And so not only as a candidate, but as a lifelong organizer, I commit to continuing to push to make sure that our working families get a living wage, a wage that doesn't put them in a position where they're having to decide between, do I pay for life-saving medication, pay my light bill, or put food on the table? And this issue doesn't just simply impact folks who are, from a socioeconomic status standpoint, are on the lowest end. This also impacts middle-income families. One of the things that I'll never forget, during my time on city council in Binghamton, my district has one of the highest childhood poverty rates in the state. It's actually double the state. And I remember working with the food bank of the Southern Tier and organizing mobile food pantries. And I remember connecting with folks who were literally supervisors at their jobs that, again, are having to depend on food pantries to be able to put food on their table, and they're in leadership. And these are also folks who own their homes. So again, this issue impacts many more people And I think we have an opportunity, and more importantly, a responsibility to lift up those stories, but even more so take direct action, not just now, but right now, to really change the life trajectory of our neighbors, friends, residents across the region, across the state, because we all do better when we all do better, and we deserve an economy that works for all of us. Thank you.
It's my fond pleasure to introduce quite a rabble-rouser, Anna Kells.
So just to get a little bit of history on the living wage task force that we had put together, I want to share a few stories of that. One of the big challenges that we were facing at the time is not just what a living wage number would be, calculating all of the needs, the expenses, but having a conversation about how much money people would actually really need to compensate for the fact that we would be pushing them over the benefits cliff, because we have a horrible system that has an actual cliff where you earn $1 more and you lose literally all of your benefits overnight. That is a horrible system that absolutely should be fixed at the federal level. It should step down. There should be continued support to help lift people up so that they don't need the support anymore. We don't have that. So that was one of the big conundrums that we faced. Here's another ridiculous conundrum that we faced. We were stuck in a situation where we wanted to increase the living wage for everybody in the county. And yet there are some positions that are mandated, the wages are mandated by the state. And their wages are at 100% the poverty level. And I'm speaking about home health care aides specifically and direct care aides. 100% the poverty level that they currently earn. We would be lifting every other person in the county to a living wage and leave them behind because that was state mandated. That is so unfair. That is so unacceptable. And in this last year, so we fought to increase the wage for home health care aides to 150% the poverty level, which is insane that that's what we were fighting for, and that was considered incredibly aggressive. The day before, we thought we were close. We were at 130 in the negotiations, and then they backpedaled, and we ended up with $2 increase, 1 year, $1 increase, the second year, so over 2 years, not over 1 year, and that was about 112% the poverty level. So just to give a sense of where we are right now, what people understand, that's the poverty level. And know, too, that we are in a country right now where our minimum wage at the federal level is still $7.25. There are states that still have that as their minimum wage. Alabama is one of them. There are a couple others. Georgia, $7.25. That is less than a third of what is a living wage. So just to give context, we need to show it's possible. We absolutely need to show it's possible here. So that is what we're up against. It's just context. If there is a bill that would increase the minimum, right, that we are supporting, that if passed, would help over 2 million people directly, 2 million New Yorkers. That is over a tenth of New Yorkers. That is how many people in New York State are suffering, way below the actual cost of living. That's how many people right now, just to give context. What I want to do is switch and bring this full circle to how do we pay for this? And to show that it's actually really possible. So when I started in the legislature, we had a campaign called the Invest in Our New York. There were like 7 bills, right? An amazing package of bills that would have increased the revenue of New York State by $50 to $70 billion. We had a corporate tax. We had an ultra-millionaires tax, a billionaires tax, a corporate gains tax, capital gains tax. We had a stock transfer tax. We had an inheritance tax, pied-à-terre tax. For those people who have 3 homes over $1 million, you know, we might want them to pay taxes on the second and the third luxury home that they have so that we can share the wealth a little bit. The inheritance tax, did you all know that when someone dies, all of their wealth, it flatlines out. When their children get that wealth, they don't pay taxes on it. It starts from 0. They don't pay taxes on it. That's insane. So you could inherit $2 trillion, $3 trillion. You pay 0 on that. That is your baseline. So this is an article that just came out today. And I think it's really important that we all understand this. A new report from the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, which is a fabulous institution, you should definitely check it out, finds that 30% of American wealth is held by households that have over $30 million in their coffers, $30 million. That 0.25% of all households hold about $47 trillion combined. 0.25% of Americans own about $47 trillion. Just to put that in context, the New York State budget is $220 billion. The US budget right now this year, our spending for this year, $5.35 trillion. 5.35. 47 trillion owned by 0.25% of Americans. We don't even have a taxing structure right now to tax these people. That is what this report is saying. So when we look at the inheritance tax, what we did get through 2 years ago, there were two bills that got through. The bill that I was carrying, which was the corporate tax bill, and then there was the ultra millionaires tax that went through. A portion of them went through. Like a fifth of my corporate tax bill was negotiated. So we know what we left on the table. We left on the table about $55 billion at a minimum. That's what we left, or 45 at a minimum. We increased our revenue by $5 to $7 billion just by those two. Just by those two. So I want to give a sense to everyone when we say that we can't afford this. We can't afford this. We have 120 billionaires alone that live in New York State. But it's really important that we understand that it is very possible to pay for this bill. It is possible to redistribute the wealth so that we don't have an experience where people are struggling to figure out how to spend the wealth that they have, and we have 2 million people figuring out how to keep the roof over their head and how to pay their electricity. And what's crazy is that most of them are probably working all day long, every day, and many of the people who are the trillionaires aren't working at all. How is that fair? So we are just talking about what's equitable and what is fair. That is it. And we can afford it, and it is what is morally and economically right, because what Leah said is if we lift everyone up and we all, our part, can engage in our economy, then we support everyone's quality of life, everyone's education, everyone's brilliance, everyone's creativity, everyone's mental health, everyone's nutritional sufficiency. How beautiful is that? That's all we're asking for. Thank you.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.